Hi everyone. Hey, thank you so much for stopping in today. I really appreciate it. Thanks for connecting with me, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. I really hope that this is a help and an encouragement to you as we navigate through these crazy times. Wow, that was a teaser, wasn't it? We got to open things up a little bit. We all got haircuts and whatever, and now everything's all shutting down again. And I know it is very, very discouraging. I want these times together on Sunday or whenever you watch this to be an encouragement to you and a help to you and a strength to you. You know, if you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook, I would love for you just to give me a little indication that you stopped by, whether it be an emoji or a comment or whatever. That would be such an encouragement to me to know that you stopped in. But I want this to be a help to you, and any comments that you have or anything, I look at those and I pray for you, and I want so much for you to have a safe time as we are distanced, but also to have a joyful, peaceful time as well. You know, last week we started talking about a guy who ran away from God. At least that's what he thought he did. You know, we sometimes all talk about running away from things, whether we run away from home or run away from work. But you know, all of us to a certain extent have probably had a time where we've ran away from God. Now, we don't say it that way. We would never flat out say, oh, I'm running away from God. But sometimes it's a very general kind of thing. Maybe you grew up in a religious home, a Christian home, or went to church when you were a kid, and you just said, you know what, I'm just not going to do that. Now that I'm on my own, or maybe you got into high school or college, you just decided, hey, I'm going to do my own thing. Maybe you just in general don't want God in your life because you think if I let God in my life, He's going to want to change some things. He's going to mess up some things. So I'm just going to let that lay aside. Some of you have just decided, God doesn't exist. And I'm not saying this in a sarcastic way. I really mean this as, if God isn't around to give us commands and standards and all of that, our conscience really gets dialed back, don't we? We really get to call the shots. We really get to make our own decisions. Some of you have run away from God in a specific area. Maybe it's in your relationships, or maybe it's in your marriage. Maybe it's in your finances. Maybe you just say, God, it's fine if you are in my life, and I'd like having you around for emergencies, but, I want to call the shots in my relationships. Or I want to call the shots in whether I, get married or not, and who I marry or not, or how I run my business. Hey, that's, God, I'm going to take care of my business, and you take care of your business, but when I need you, I'm going to call on you. But, and of course, we are very willing to have God step in when we're in trouble, aren't we? But we don't want Him coming in and intruding on those areas where we really want to have control. Some of you might even have a time frame where you say, I've kind of got an area of my life, a time in my life where I see I'll follow God then. For example, you say, hey, when I get through college, I don't want God messing up my college days. So when I get through college, then I'm going to start following God. Or maybe it's when you get married. I want my single life to be fun. So, I don't want to have God messing that up. Or maybe it's when you have kids. Yeah, God's important. Church is important for kids. So it's when I have kids, I'm going to start following God's plan for my life. And the truth is during this time when we are physically wearing masks, where we are social distancing from each other. I think that's kind of a good analogy for what many of us want to do with God. Throw up the mask there, put the mask on before people as well as before God. We want some distance from God. A time in our lives when it could be a very wonderful opportunity to get closer to God. Instead, we decide, you know what, I'm just going to step back. Like I'm stepping back from people, I'm going to step back from my spiritual life as well. And so, there is, I think, during a pandemic, a really great opportunity, if I could put it that way, to blame this pandemic on socially, spiritually, our distancing from people and even our responsibilities. But here's the thing. When we distance ourselves from God, I think there's a couple of reasons why we do that. I think we do that, one, because we think we're going to miss out on something. We feel like, if we let God in our lives, we are going to miss out on something fun. So we just say, forget it. It could also be that we just don't trust God. Is God going to come through for us? Does He really have our back when we are in a jam? It could be that some of you are confusing God with church. Maybe you had a terrible church experience. God is not church. Okay? Now, hopefully we see God and find God and worship God in church, but the truth is that God and church are not the same thing, and some of you kind of wrote off church, so you wrote off God at the same time. For some of you, you're just kind of judging your activity with God, your involvement with God, or God's involvement with you by the way your life goes. If life is going well, sure, I'll let God in my life. But if life starts to really stink, why have God in my life? Why follow Christ if life is going to be rough, if it's going to be difficult? And so that's what we do. And when we looked last week, we're talking about Jonah, a guy who's a classic runner, trying to run away from God. But what we found is when people run, they run to the strangest places. Jonah ran to a boat. It would be kind of like some of you running to an airplane, especially during this COVID, right? But, something that you're afraid of or whatever, you think, why didn't Jonah stay on dry ground? At least he was on something solid, but he jumps onto a boat. And we sometimes do that, the strangest things. So I've seen people who are running away from God jump into a marriage or jump out of one. I've seen people, quickly just start a business. They don't care, what the wisdom is. They're just going to do their own thing. And it's really, really hard to see that sometimes. Sometimes we make some really unwise decisions, and then it causes our lives to kind of unravel. That's another thing that we found, that, sometimes dreams won't come true, and, relationships fall apart or don't work out, or disappointments just seem to be one right after the other. And all of these unwise decisions come because really turning away from God is really turning away from the very source of wisdom and truth. Now, I know some of you might push back on that statement, but really, God accepts us. He loves us unconditionally. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today. His very purpose for our lives, we push back on that when we turn and our backs on God or run away from God. Sadly, we also see that when our lives are unraveling, one of the truths is that the bad decisions that we make, the running away from God, it hurts the people who are closest to us. Yes, our children, our spouses, our employees, our employer even, those who are our business partners. It hurts those people who we are closest to. Some of you are actually paying the price for people who are close to you making really unwise decisions. And some of you have really felt that. Well, that's just kind of a review of last week, and we're going to talk about what we learned. But we're going to talk about Jonah, and we're going to see him as a runner, but we're also going to see how God worked in his life, because he is given kind of the brakes on his life because of what he decided to do. I wanted to catch all of you up in case you weren't able to be here last week and to hear last week's message. But I want to read that first chapter. It's not very long. It's just 17 verses in the Bible, to kind of see as a setup for today. So here's Jonah chapter 1, and this is where we were last week. I hope you'll go back and you could see that message last week. But here is what happened. Here's the events. Jonah chapter 1, beginning at verse 1, says, "The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh." Now that's where Mosul, Iraq is today. "Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me." We talked about this. They are brutal, cruel, ruthless people. Israel's worst enemy. Just kind of think of them as the great-great-great-great-grandparents of ISIS and the Taliban. But Jonah ran away from the all-knowing, everywhere present Lord. God's everywhere, and yet he's trying to run away from the Lord. And by the way, I just want to say, sometimes God's going to ask us to do things we don't want to do. This is one of those examples. And that's what makes life hard sometimes. Sometimes God will ask us to do very, very hard things. So he ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. No theological discussion, just nope, I'm not going. And instead of going 550 miles east to Nineveh, he heads about 2,500 miles west to, or trying to get to Tarshish. And he went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. Now, can I just say too, remember, you can always find a ship going in the wrong direction. You can always find a boat sailing away. If you want to run away from God, you'll always be able to do that. Well, after paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. And by the way, that's also true, and maybe we're in the middle one, that God may decide to send a storm to get our attention. Maybe that's what this COVID thing is. I wonder if God's just trying to get our attention. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. All the sailors, and these were experienced commercial sailors, were afraid, and each cried out to his own God. So all that religious training they had as kids kind of came back to them, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. Now you know you're in trouble when you burn your business to the ground, right? But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. The captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us, that we will not perish." Then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity." They cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. So they asked him, "Tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you?" They said, "Don't hold anything back. Tell us everything." He answered, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." This terrified them, and they said, "What have you done?" They knew he was running away from the Lord, because he had already told them so. Now, when he got on the boat, they didn't worry about that. They didn't think that was such a big deal at the time. But now that he's told them this, now they really are in a panic. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, "What should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us?" "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he replied, "and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." Instead, the men did their best to row back to the land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. See, they knew that he couldn't survive the sea, but they also weren't so sure that maybe this God that he served wasn't going to get even more angry if they threw him overboard. So they're really in a difficult place. But finally, then they cried out to the Lord, "Please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, Lord, have done as you pleased." Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah. They didn't have Uber, so God used a fish. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. As we're going to see in a moment, Jonah's worst nightmare was exactly what he needed. And I got to just say too quickly, some people look at this and they think that this is kind of an allegory or whatever. I believe this isn't allegorical. I think this is absolutely historically true. They use real people with real names, real places, all of that. Jesus even refers to the story of Jonah as being real, and so I think it's real. But listen, even if you have trouble with that, we can learn some very, very important lessons in this. So I hope that you'll stay tuned, whether you think, wow, how could this happen? In fact, you might say, come on. A guy gets swallowed by a giant fish or whale or whatever, and he's in there for 3 days, and he survives. I mean, that would be a miracle. And you know what? I would tend to agree with you. I think it is a miracle. Well, after Jonah is swallowed up by the fish, he realizes that God's not going to just let him drown there. He realizes that, wow, there's more he's going to have to suffer. And so he began to pray. And later on, he wrote down his thoughts. I think he kind of was journaling what was going on in his mind when he was in that fish. Because I got to tell you, in the middle of that whole thing where he's inside the fish, I don't think that he spoke and prayed as eloquently as is recorded here in Jonah chapter 2. And the reason is, I think he later just kind of outlines and he shares some insights that he learned while he was going through that experience. I think the actual prayer would take us 3 days to read, because I think as soon as he's got inside that fish, I think he started praying and praying and praying and never ever stopped. But the truth is that we do learn some insights. And if you find yourself running, or you know someone who's running, or you have been running, or whatever you would call it, if you're turning your back on God and kind of stiff-arming God, I want you to know that God has some attitudes towards you that I think are important for you to know. God's attitude toward those who run. Last week we talked about how we all run from God, and maybe some of us recognize it, now, and maybe even last week you said, yeah, that's me. I'm running away from God. But here's what Jonah learned about God and what we can learn about God as we perhaps are running. Jonah chapter 2, verse 1. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. Finally. See, up to this point, Jonah hasn't prayed at all. In fact, even the pagans on the ship had been praying, but Jonah hadn't been praying at all. And so, and sometimes, people think of prayer as just kind of, us giving God his job description. He's kind of like our concierge, But the truth is, God doesn't need prayer. God uses prayer to change us and to mold us and to make us into what we should be. It says, he prayed to the Lord his God. He said, and here's what we discover, in my distress, I called to the Lord. And here's the surprise, he answered me. The very first truth I want us to discover about God's attitude toward those who run is this, is that when they decide to pray, God listens to their prayer. For some of you, maybe the first time you prayed or first time you prayed in a long time was probably in a time of distress. You're staring at a pregnancy test. You're in the back seat of a squad car. You're on your way to tell your parents something that you really hoped you wouldn't have to tell them. You're on your way to tell your spouse, to confess something. It could be a number of things. But you called on God. Even if you're running away from God, I want you to know he listens to our prayers. Now, that's amazing to me because, think of it. Why would God have a reason to listen to our prayers? Especially if somebody who's just blatantly, repeatedly saying no to God. Why would God stop and listen to our prayers? I want you to know, when you're at your wit's end, when you think you've had so much, you're just going to go crazy, you're at the bottom, facing the consequences of bad decisions you've made, I want you to know, God is there. Maybe you say, hey, I've got no one to blame but myself. God is there to listen to your prayers. Oftentimes we're like Jonah. We bring junk on ourselves. And that's exactly what happened to Jonah. He brought this on himself. But look at this. Jonah, who hoped that God couldn't see him, out in the ocean, hoped that God couldn't see him on land, is now realizing that God sees him right in the belly of this fish. Verse 2, it says, from deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help, and you listened to my cry. He figures he's a goner. Why would God listen to prayer? Again, somebody who just blatantly, repeatedly said, forget you, God. I'm going to do my own thing. I know what you're asking me to do. I'm not going to do it. But then we see life unraveling, and then they come back to God. I can just picture God going, fine. Hey, you got yourself into it. Get yourself out of it. Why would God listen to those prayers? Please, I want you to be encouraged. When you've been running, when you've turned your back on God, you say, I don't even believe in God. You know something? If you pray to God, God will hear you. He will hear you. It kind of reminds me, the last 30 years of ministry, I have done a lot of counseling. My favorite kind of counseling is premarital counseling because it's kind of preventative. You're catching this young couple before they do anything really stupid yet. But it's my favorite kind. But there are times people will come to me, individuals or couples will come to me, and they'll ask my advice, they'll ask for my counsel, and they won't take my advice. In fact, maybe they'll do exactly the opposite of really what I recommend. And sometimes they go away mad. I mean, when I give advice, sometimes they take it personally and they just leave the church and they say, forget it, Well, then they go and their life begins to really go crazy. They get themselves into trouble. Life unravels. And then they call me and they say, hey, can you counsel us? We're really in a mess. We're really in trouble. And it's all because they didn't take my advice. And I got to tell you, I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes that irritates me. Now, I try not to act irritated when I meet with them, but it really does. It really bugs me. And I have some really, really, really good news for you. God isn't like me. He doesn't get irritated with you. He's not short-tempered like I am. Even on those times when you're heading into something and God says no, and your mama says no, and even your best friend says don't go there, and yet you go ahead and you step into it, God's not like me. When you come back to him and say, God, help, you know what? God hears you. He hears you. I'm emphasizing this point because it may be that truth knowing that will help some of you be encouraged to turn back to God. See, some of you may be saying, I'm not going to turn to God. I mean, look at my, how far I've come. Look at how old I am. Look what I've done. Look at how, I've been telling myself my whole life. Ever since junior high school, I've said God doesn't exist. And now turn to God? I'm telling you, he is there. You always have an option. As long as you're breathing, as long as you're on, you're 6 feet above ground, as they say, you have the option of turning to God, turning back to him or turning to him for the first time. I want you to know that. You don't have to keep running away. Whatever distress you're going through, whatever problems you're going through, be assured God hears your prayers, just like he did with Jonah. Now, another truth that we discover about God toward those whose run is this, is that God is often in the middle, right in the midst of the circumstances that bring us to the end of ourselves. See, God's often directly responsible, directly handling, directly involved in the circumstances that bring you back to yourself. And that was true. If you're a runner and running away from God, this could be the very thing that keeps you from not running, from stopping the run. In verse 3 in Jonah 2, it says, you hurled me into the deep. We say, wait. God didn't throw you in the deep. It was those sailors who threw you into the deep. And Jonah would say, hey, I was there. I'm fully aware of what happened. Yes, the sailors were the ones who physically grabbed me and threw me overboard. But it was really God. It was really God who was involved in all that. He really orchestrated that idea of me being overboard anyway. So, and some of you, you're going to look at situations in your life, and maybe somebody does something to you or a circumstance comes up and you're going to say, wow, that was terrible. But later you're going to look back and you're going to go, wow, God orchestrated that. God worked that out. Sure, the sailors were the people that God used, but God orchestrated the whole thing. And here's what you'll discover, is that sometimes those circumstances you hate, it could be, the relationship disintegrating, it could be the job going away, it could be the overwhelming debt, it could be the destructive decisions, all those situations, the things that really make you angry. It could be that one day you're going to look back on those and you're going to say, wow, I didn't realize it then, but God was right in the middle of all that. God was using all that, not to pay you back, but to bring you back, to win you back. It was God loving you, really, to bring you back. See, the events that are slowly just taking you down, whatever it might be, you feel like you're losing it. You feel like you'll never be able to, put your life back together. You just feel like the pieces are all scattered. And there's just too many. We call that, kind of the Humpty Dumpty syndrome. It's all scattered all over the place. I want you to know, God will use circumstances, situations to bring you back because he loves you. See, it's really what we would expect from a loving Heavenly Father. A father, a daddy pursuing us, saying, I'm not going to let you go. I want you to be here with me. And he brings... There's things that we go through. I can think of circumstances that I went through that I hated. And yet God used them to bring me closer to him. And God's willing, really God's first desire is for his love and his grace and his mercy to win us. But if that doesn't work, he's willing to use circumstances in our lives to bring us back to him, to win us back to him. So it says, Jonah continues on, he says, it was into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled around me. And watch this, whose? God's. All your waves, all God's waves and breakers swept over me. The third insight is really related to that second one, and that is this. God is generous with his grace, but he's also thorough with his discipline. See, when God pursues us to bring us back to him, sometimes he's not gentle about it. Sometimes he's pretty tough about it. Sometimes when God is disciplining us to bring us back, his tough love may seem very extreme. And sometimes he allows things that we can't even imagine that he would let us go through. Jonah describes his situation. Look what he says, starting in verse 4. He goes, I said, I have been banished from your sight, yet I will look again toward your holy temple. Now, he isn't saying, holy temple, wow, he isn't saying, I want to go back to church. I'm really anxious to get back to church. Now, some of you are saying that, and I am too. I'm very anxious to see you back in church. That's not what he's talking about. He's really referring to God's presence, That holy temple is referring to God's presence. He's afraid that not only is God going to kill him physically, but he's afraid that God's going to push him away, if I could put it this way, out of his family. But look, our Heavenly Father, if he is our Father, if he is your Father, he's not throwing you out of his family. If you know him as your Heavenly Father, you are a part of his family. But he was afraid. He said, wow, but here's the truth. The truth is, it's better to have God's presence in the middle of a crisis than to not have God's presence, but have a resolution to the crisis. In other words, we need God's presence more than we need any kind of solutions. And here's how he describes being inside the fish. The engulfing waters threatened me. I mean, he thought he was at the end. The deep surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. Now I have to stop and say, are any of you germaphobes? Now just picture this. Okay, you're inside of a fish. I mean, some of you don't even like the smell. You don't even want to get near a fish. Some of you would never even touch a fish. And yet here he is right in the middle of it. How many of you are afraid of the dark? I mean, it's obviously pitch dark inside of a fish. How many of you are claustrophobic? Can you imagine? No space. You can't move. You're just squished in there. Some of you say, you can't swim. And here you are, you're in a fish. That would be the absolute worst. Some of you have a fear of drowning. And, that's one thing having been a lifeguard, I would just hate that. And the truth is that we don't know how many of these were true of Jonah, but just picture Jonah as this germaphobe who is claustrophobic and afraid of the dark and can't swim very well. How horrible would that be? Well, he goes on, he just says, to the roots of the mountains I sank down. So it tells me he could kind of sense when the fish was submerging and coming back up. That would be a weird feeling. The earth beneath barred me in forever. But you, it's like all this is going on, but you, Lord, my God, brought my life up from the pit. He's saying, wow, I'm realizing this isn't, God's not trying to kill me. This is a rescue mission. When my life was ebbing away, when he's thinking, okay, this is it. I've endured more than a human being can survive. He said, I remembered you, Lord, and my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. I think some of the situations you're going through, the difficulties that God's allowing in your life, maybe he's using those for you to finally go, oh yeah, God is with me, even through this terrible event, even through these terrible circumstances. Here's a question. How long do you think it took Jonah to start praying or start crying out to God or start repenting in this whole situation? Do you think it took 3 days? Or maybe it was into the second day or whatever. Maybe it was like the middle of the first day. Can I tell you, I think it was, I don't even think he was 3 minutes in. In fact, think about it. First he thinks he's going to drown. And then he finds himself inside the belly of a fish. That's not good. He doesn't know if he's going to make it through that. But when I think he really started to repent? I think he started to repent when the soldiers grabbed his arms and grabbed his legs and started doing the 1, 2, 3. I think that's when, maybe when he was airborne, coming right before he hit the water. I think that's when he started to repent. I don't know. But the truth is that God knew what Jonah needed, and God decided to bring him back. He is thorough with his discipline. When the nation of Israel rebelled against God, he didn't send them into exile for a year. It wasn't for 10 years. It wasn't even 50 years. He put them in exile for 70 years. When the children of Israel rebelled, the whole Moses story, he didn't, just say, okay, you're going to have to, walk around for 4 years in the wilderness. They walked around for 40 years. When David committed adultery with Bathsheba, God didn't just slap him on the hand and say, David, you're a good guy. You shouldn't have done that. We all make mistakes. No. He took his son. He took all of his sons, actually. He took his baby. He took his sons. He took his kingdom. He took his reputation. He took his influence. He lost everything. You think, wow, isn't that way, way, way too much? Sometimes I think, God, aren't you overdoing it? But you know what I want you to know? And this may sound really, really difficult to hear, but sometimes God loves us enough to scar us. He loves us enough to scar us. Um, I'll never forget when our house was being built, the house that we're living in now, when it was being built many years ago. As you can probably imagine, I made friends with all the contractors, and I look back and I probably think I was the biggest irritation to them. But, I can't fix anything and I don't know how to, build anything. So they were always intriguing me, but I'm, friendly and I wanted to talk to them. And so I got to know them. And there was one guy in particular that I would talk to quite frequently. We got to know each other pretty well. We got to know each other well enough so that I could ask him about a scar, a big scar he had on his wrist. And I just concluded that he must have been in a terrible accident or maybe had some kind of wrist surgery or whatever. But then he told me that his life had gone to a really dark, difficult place. He was in great despair, and he took a utility knife, and those of you, who use one of those utility knives like on a construction site, he took a utility knife and he slit his wrist, and he lay down on his kitchen floor and was just prepared to die. Well, it just so happened that another guy, the guy who actually painted our house, was a good friend of his and stopped by and found him in a pool of blood, was able to get him help quickly enough to rescue him and to save his life. The truth is, when he told that story, he said, I'm so thankful now to be alive, and I'm also so thankful that somebody valued me enough to find me and to do something. He said, that scar is a constant reminder that I'm valuable, that I'm loved, and that my life has a purpose. And that story, that's been over 20 years ago, and I'll never forget that. Looking at that really very aggressive scar and seeing that. Some of you may have seen recently that little boy, Bridger Walker, who he's 6 years old, saved his sister from the attack of a dog. And if you see the pictures of him, the scars that are going to be on his face are incredible. That dog did so, they say over 90 stitches, they lost track. And, the articles I saw, they said 90 or more, stitches all on his face. And, this brave little boy, he's going to wear that scar the rest of his life. But, if what he did is any indication of his character, I have a feeling that in a sense, he's going to wear that scar with pride. That was a scar of bravery. That was a scar of paying a price. That was a scar of love that he demonstrated toward his sister. I think that sister's going to look at that scar and she's never going to forget and never be anything but grateful for a brother who loved her that much. I remember as a kid, when my parents were going to punish us, especially if my dad was going to punish us. My mom's 5 feet, she's little, and although she could punish us, with the best of them, but sometimes my dad would come in. But I remember times when they were going to punish us, and we would start apologizing. I would start saying, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, please, I'll never do it, I'm sorry, all that kind of stuff. And guess what they would do? They would punish us anyway. You know why? They knew, as a loving parent, what God knows, and that is that God wants us, and my parents wanted us, to associate rebellion with pain so closely that it would change our lives. When my parents did that as kids, and my parents weren't abusive, they loved us, and the truth is that when they would punish us, it was them saying, look, we want you in your life, all the rest of your life, to associate disobedience, rebellion against God and against, those who need to be obeyed as painful. I'll never forget that. Parents, can I just say, I'm just throwing this in, this is just a little free thing. If you have children, especially older children, and they're running away from God, one of the things that you can do for them to help them the most is to let them feel the full upfront, that full consequences of their rebellion against God. Because here's the thing, I know that as a parent, it's our tendency to want to jump back in the sea, to use the Jonah analogy, to go and rescue them, to pull them out of it, but you know what that really does, I found over the years, really all that does is really prolong their pain, it prolongs your pain, as well as sometimes it just circumvents what God really wants to do in their life. So, that's a hard one. I'm telling you, that may be harder than our own difficulties in our lives. But I know as parents, it really helps. Well, here's the fourth thing. The fourth truth that Jonah learned about God is that to run from God really is to run from his provision and from his protection. See, Jonah says this in a very unique way. He uses a little Hebrew word that's used throughout the Old Testament, and it's used for a very specific reason. In Jonah 2:8, it says, "Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them." In other words, they forfeit the grace that could be theirs. And that little Hebrew word there for love, it means God's goodness, God's kindness. It's also translated as grace. And it really refers to God's unconditional love. And Jonah says, look, I realize that God wanted me, to go to the Ninevites. I was supposed to go tell them that they turned from their pagan gods and they turned to God. That God was going to not judge them. He was going to forgive them. But I have done the same thing that they're doing. I've turned my back on God. I've gotten focused on something I wanted, really excluding God from my plans. See, that's an idol. Idols in our culture, really, we sometimes think of idols as just little statues. But idols in our culture, I think, sometimes are good things that are misplaced, good things in the wrong spot. We have good things in our lives, but they get put in the place where God is supposed to be. And I see Jonah here, when you look at this passage, he's just realizing, he says, I've been pursuing this thing that I thought would bring me fulfillment. I thought that running away from God and not going to the Ninevites was going to make me happy. And so I've turned my back on God. I've turned my back then on God's unconditional love. I've turned my back on His mercy, His grace, His forgiveness. I've turned my back on all of that. It's like we said earlier, that the reason that most of us turn our back on God is we're afraid that we're going to miss out on something. We're afraid that we're not going to be satisfied. We're not going to be happy, that God's going to take goodness away from our life, when it's exactly the opposite. And we can think that in general, or we can think that in an area of our life, that, we're going to miss out somehow. But you know what? Here's the truth. We can't run away from God's love, but we can run away from God, from us experiencing God's love. You understand that? If you run away from God, if you were to stop and turn around, God's right there. God is always there. He loves you. He's always going to love you. But we can turn our back on God and not experience His love, even though that love is right there and available to all of us. And that's what Jonah discovered. He discovered what God wants us all to discover, and that is that we forfeit His grace and we forfeit His love, that love of God, if we pursue, and he says them as worthless idols. The truth is that we don't really think of ourselves as, ever worshiping idols. But I know that it's God's love that you really long for. You say, again, hey, I don't even believe in love. But in your despair, in your difficulty, you know what I know? When you're going through the hardest times in your life, you don't cry out for that thing that you are pursuing. You don't cry out for that person you are pursuing, that position, that whatever it might be. You don't cry out to that thing or that person or that situation. You cry out to God in your despair, whether you really believe in Him or not. Often, though, it isn't until we're broken that we realize this, because in Jonah chapter 2, verse 9, it says, "But I, with a song of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you." I think he really shows us what true gratitude is, because think about it. He's giving thanks before he's out of the fish. He's still right in the middle of it. And I think that's what faith is. Faith is us trusting God when we don't yet see it. Faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. And that's where Jonah was. He said, I lift up the song of thanksgiving. I'll sacrifice to you. What I have vowed, I will make good. Salvation comes from the Lord. Now, he's having a moment of discovery here. He hasn't been saved from his situation yet. But he's thinking, man, I thought I could save myself. I thought by jumping on a boat in Joppa and running off to Tarshish, I could save myself from, all this difficulty. Now, when he uses that word of salvation, he's not talking about heaven and hell here. He's talking about some very practical things. Now, salvation, heaven and hell, does belong to God. But what he's also saying is that he thought he could save himself from his misery. He thought he could save himself, but, from doing his own thing and going his own way. And we do that. We think that we can save ourselves from unhappiness. We think we can save ourselves from guilt. We think we can save ourselves from loneliness. We think we can save ourselves from not having pleasure or whatever. Yes, Eternal salvation is from the Lord and from the Lord only. But so is salvation from our loneliness, salvation from our guilt, salvation from a lack of peace, salvation from whatever dissatisfaction or unhappiness. Look, salvation from a broken heart is from the Lord. A salvation from fear is from the Lord. And Jonah's saying, look, salvation is only found in the Lord. It's like he's going, what in the world was I thinking? Of course it only comes from the Lord. Look, one of the most valuable things I think that we can stop and ask ourselves is this. What am I trying to save myself from? Yes, God promises heaven when we die. If we've accepted Christ as our Savior, if we're going God's way, that's running toward Him. But Jonah already knew that. He was already a follower of God. He said he worshiped God. But he needed to understand, too, that salvation in every other area of life also comes from the Lord. So then, why are we running from the very source that we're looking for? See, Jonah has his aha moment with God, but then God surprises him even more. And here's what we learn. Number 5, that God is a God of second chances. See, if you didn't know the end of the story, you just assume that's it for Jonah. It's all done. He disobeys God, so he's, not going to get this quick drowning death. No. He's going to get thrown overboard. He's going to get swallowed by a fish. And then eventually, he's got this moment of revelation. And then, he's saying, God, you were right. God's saying, yeah, I know. And now I got to find a new prophet. So that's it. But that's not how the story ends. Even to a guy who has said flat out, God, no. That's pretty nervy, isn't it? That's pretty desperate as well. He says flat out no to God. He says, even with all that, God says, I'm going to give you a second chance. In verse 10 it says, and the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Now with me, as soon as the fish vomited me, I would vomit too, because I'm one of those sympathetic vomiters. Anybody else? Let's not go there. We'll move on. We'll talk about that some next week, actually. But in chapter 3, that's the end of chapter 2, it says, then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Remember, the word of the Lord said, go to Nineveh. And because here's the thing. Remember, God's goal isn't to pay us back. It's to bring us back. He says again, a second time, go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you. Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh. I bet he did. You get swallowed by a fish and get, swam around for 3 days, you're probably going to obey. Now, Nineveh was a very large city. It took 3 days to go through it. So, very, very large. Here's some good news. All the bad decisions, all of the consequences, all of the sin, all of those wasted years, God can leverage that for good. You say, I've got so much baggage. I've got so many consequences. I've got so much that I'm living with, so much regret. Let me just tell you, God can use that for good. He can leverage that for something good. You may think you've drifted too far or denied him too long or whatever. You cannot run outside of God's love and God's mercy. What's also great news is that when you stop running, sometimes God's able to, and he will start restoring some of those things that you lost. It could be those relationships. It could be even finances. Those things, God can bring those back to you as well. Here's what God can't give you. He can't give you back the time that's been wasted. And that's a hard one, isn't it? Because some of us, and I'm probably one of those, I'd like to rewind and do some sections of my life over. But God doesn't allow us to have that time back. But you know what I know? We can't go back and make a new start. But we can start now and make a brand new end. You can stop running. You can stop running today. Something interesting about the Jewish people up to this point and right even today. On Yom Kippur, in the synagogue, they read the entire book of Jonah. Now it's very short, it's not very long. But they read the entire book of Jonah, and then they say together, they shout out together, we are Jonah. And they do that because they want to demonstrate and illustrate that, number one, nobody is out of God's reach. every single one of you, just please do not ever think you are out of God's reach. Just like Nineveh, just like Jonah, you're never out of God's reach. But then they also looked at Nineveh and how terrible they were, and they read that whole book because it reminds them that no matter what's in your past, no matter how bad you think you have messed up, no matter what regrets you have, God is here, and God is available, and God is listening, and God wants to save you. We're reminded again that we can run from God, but we can't outrun God. We cannot outrun the love of God. And the very fact that God sent Jesus to die on the cross, to be buried, and to rise again is an illustration of that. Look, you don't have to be good to get to heaven. That salvation that Jonah talks about, it is from the Lord. And God supplies that to us, His forgiveness, His mercy, His grace, His love. God came in the flesh to come, not to pay you back, but to bring you back, to win you back, to bring you into His family. And today, if you realize that, and you realize, wow, I've been running from God, I've been turning my back on Him, or just distant, you can come to Him today. If you've never been following God, if you've never come, His way to Himself is Jesus. Jesus tells us, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father except through me. Jesus was gracious and loving enough to tell us, look, you don't have to worry about 100 different ways. You don't have to worry about rituals. You don't have to worry about performance. I am supplying that forgiveness, that payment for you. You can accept that today. As I have done each of these weeks, we've been, distancing and doing these online messages. I've been leading you in a prayer, and it's just a prayer similar to what I prayed when I accepted Christ as my Savior, when I asked Him to be my Savior and to forgive my sin and to come into my life. When I became a Jesus follower, I prayed something similar to this. There's no magical prayer. It's just us expressing, hey, God, I'm not running anymore. I'm coming to you. I'm following you, following your will and direction. Instead of saying no, I'm saying yes to you. As we close today, I would invite you to pray this prayer if you'd like. Some of you say, I've already prayed this prayer. Just pray for those who might be praying for this, may be praying this prayer right now. Would you? Let's pray together. Dear God, thank you for inviting me to call you my Heavenly Father. Today I stop running from you, and I ask you to help me pursue your purpose for my life. I know I could never earn my way into your family, but today I accept your forgiveness for all my sin. Thank you for sending your Son Jesus to die on the cross and rise again so that I can have the joy, peace, and hope that you offer. Today I ask you to be my Savior, to come into my life forever. Thank you for saving me. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, if you prayed that, would you let me know? I would be so delighted to know that you prayed that prayer and asked Christ into your life. I want to be of any encouragement to you that I can be. I'm not going to bug you or badger you or whatever. If you'd like some information, even if you're not sure about this, you have to say, I need some more information. I can send you things, I can email you things, whatever. I want to be here to connect with you and to help you grow in your spiritual life. So I want to say again, thank you so much for this opportunity just to be able to share this message with you. And as we close today, I want to pray for you and let you know that God is with you and that He loves you, and that no matter where you are, there He is. Dear God, thank you for our time together online. And I pray that you would help us, Father, to see that you are always with us. Oh, it's so easy for us to think that you are far away. And sometimes we just feel that way. But Lord, I pray that you'd have every single person watching this message to realize that, God, whether they believe in you or not, you believe in them. Whether they feel close to you, you are close to them. They can call on you at any time. Thank you for that assurance. And I pray, Lord, that you keep each of them safe, healthy, and that you guard them from difficulty. And even in the midst of our hardships that we're going through now with this pandemic, may you help us to look up to you for strength. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, thanks so much. And I just want to say, Hillside family, I hope you'll stay tuned because I have some exciting updates that really, of things happening at the church, I know you don't want to miss. For the rest of you, and of course, if you're not a part of the Hillside family, you're more than welcome to stay and watch. But hey, I just want to say thank you again so much for connecting, and I hope that you're finding that this finds you well and blessed, and I look forward to connecting with you again. Take care. God bless you. Hi, Hillside family. Hey, thanks first of all for staying tuned, because I have some exciting things to share with you that I know you don't want to miss. But number one, first of all, I want to say I really miss you. I mean, wow, this is just crazy how much I miss you. It's just not the same preaching to a phone. And some of you are saying, well, thank you. That we're more exciting to look at than a phone. But I actually envision you guys sitting there and sitting in your section. So I really do. I picture you, and I miss you so much. I want you to know that. But here's the exciting thing I want to share with you. At Hillside, we've kind of put some projects on the back burner because we really haven't had the opportunity to be able to do some of these things. Why? Because we meet every Sunday, because the youth group meets. We use that building. We try to the fullest capacity, and we really haven't been able to do some updating, some upgrading that we really felt we needed to do until now. God has given us this window of opportunity to be able to do some things that we wouldn't do if we were meeting every single week. So I want to tell you of some excitement and of things that are happening. We are going to be recarpeting the auditorium. It's going to be absolutely beautiful. We're repainting, so really updating that, freshening everything up, cleaning up, organizing, and so forth. But also, I want to let you know, and this is the drum roll, we're getting brand new chairs. That's right. Now, some of you might say, wait, I like the pews, which that probably means that you've never sat in one. I'm kidding. But some of you say, well, I like that chapel-y kind of look. And it's great. I mean, God gave it to us. But, we've never been able to really use to the fullest extent that room, that building, that auditorium, because we're kind of locked in with those pews. So literally for years and years, we have been saying, wouldn't it be great if we had chairs? Well, we are finally going to do that. We're going to be updating and upgrading the auditorium, and then going to be recarpeting and moving in brand new chairs. Now, this is where you can come in. Obviously, there's no company out there giving away chairs for free. So many of you have been faithfully giving each week. God's provided for us, and honestly, I can't thank you enough. And I know you don't give to me, you're giving to God. But thank you for your faithful giving to the Lord each week at Hillside. But perhaps you would like to do a little bit extra to help this project. It would be so helpful. Maybe you would think of, buying a chair for each person in your family. Maybe you'd want to donate that a little extra. The chairs, if you round out everything, shipping and all of that kind of stuff, just think of it as being about $50 a chair. Maybe you say, oh, good, I can buy chairs for the whole family. Or if God's really blessed you, you say, I'll cover chairs for the whole church. I don't expect that. But God could do that, and of course, I want you to know that whatever God leads you to give, that would be so helpful. So, and this isn't just a plug for giving. I want you to be excited about what God's doing in the midst of a very frustrating time for all of us. I want you to know, too, right as the COVID hit, and probably maybe right before it, we got a leak, and we didn't find out until later. We got a leak in the nursery, and it affected the floor upstairs in the nursery, as well as in the women's bathroom and the downstairs women's bathroom. And this is giving us an opportunity to look at that. Some mold had built up. I was so thankful nobody's in the building. I don't know if it was toxic mold or whatever, but that's being treated and dealt with while we're gone. So that's given us an opportunity. Got some surprises downstairs. I don't know if you know it, but downstairs is all recarpeted. Upstairs, some things are happening as well in the toddler and children's area. So I just want so much for you to be thankful in the midst of this frustration. And I want you to also be involved. I hope that if you say, wow, I've been kind of waiting to give or whatever, you can give now. You can give online. It's not difficult. Or you can send in a check. That is safe. We're getting those, during the week, we're getting that at the post office box. So I want you to be involved. And if you designate a gift and say, hey, this is for the special remodeling or for the chairs or whatever you might say, something like that, we'll make sure it gets designated to that. But I am so grateful for those of you who have continued to be faithful in following God, looking up to Him, and even giving, even when we can't meet together. Again, I want to say I love you. I appreciate you. I can hardly wait for us to be back together again. But in the meantime, I hope you'll stay tuned online. Hey, thanks so much. I love you, and I look forward to seeing you, and I'm praying that I can see you soon. God bless.